Welcome to my channel of Miel Hebraica, Hebrew honey, and today we're going to continue to follow the path of the trajectory of Megilah Sefer, that is the scroll of the book. And this is, as we've already seen in the previous videos, when Jeremiah prepared a scroll and asked Baruch to write it all down. Baruch went to read it in the temple, and then the scribes and the leaders and the officials of the city heard this, and then they had him read it to them also at the chamber of one of the scribes. And yeah, it's caused quite a stir. So now we're going to see what happens as the scroll moves through officialdom and finally makes its way to the king. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic as to what happens here. And when they had heard all the words, these are all the officials that had gathered to listen to Baruch read the scroll to them. When they had heard all the words, they turned to each other in fear, and they said to Baruch, we must confront the king face to face about all these things. Vayhi ke sham'am et kol hadevarim pachedu ish el re'eu Yomru el Baruch Haged Nagid Lamelech et Kol Ha-Devarim Ha'ela. And it so happened, and then when they had heard, Ke Sham Am, when we have a verb like Shin Mem Aleph, which means to hear or to listen, and it's started out with a preposition. Anytime you have a preposition like this attached to the front of a verb, it works as an infinitive. So, and as in the hearing, or when they heard, as they heard, and this is the plural ending of this one. Then it's they, and as they heard, et kol hadevarim, all. This is the direct object marker. So whatever they're hearing is this thing here, hadevarim. And kamas hatuv, so you pronounce this as an O rather than an A. So et kol hadevarim, all of these words, all of these things. Pachadu, they panicked. They pushed the panic button. It's kind of interesting. They turned to each other in fear. This is one place where we can go back to very much an original root to figure this word out. The pei is the face, in other words. So they're facing things, and their faces kind of spin around and look at each other. They go pachadu. In other words, when we see this word, it's kind of like, wow, they turn to each other, pachadu, and in other words, somewhat terrified. They're kind of horror on their faces. It's really interesting to picture what was happening there. But the words of the scroll had quite an impact on all of these leaders. They realized, hey, some big stuff coming on down. And I'm pretty sure Jeremiah didn't pull any punches. He was telling them, hey, this whole place is going to come crashing down, so better pay attention. And so, pahadu, and they turned their faces. Each one. It's interesting in English, we can use the word each one. So each man, each person. Ish el re'eu, to his companion, to the one beside him. Okay, the one that he can see beside him. It also means the word friend. The word Ruth is derived from this word, the friendly one, the companion. But anyway, here's re'eu, to his neighbor. This is a well-known idiom in Hebrew, to have each person turn to their neighbor and find out, hey, things are interesting happening. We see it when the languages are disturbed in Genesis, and they turn to the neighbor and they can't really understand each other. Okay, so ish al re'eu, each one to his neighbor. Va yomaru, and they said, el Baruch, to Baruch, Haged Nagid, Haged Nagid. Obviously, we see a repeating of the verb right here, Gimel Yodalet. And so often in translators, people who translate scripture, and when they see Hebrew repeat itself, they go, oh, this is simply for emphasis. In other words, they said, or they had to tell, or most certainly had to say something, or in other words, they tend to just take the verb and add something emphatic to it. They most certainly had to do this, they had to do that. However, if you get back to the original root of this particular verb, and it's nagad, and it's actually derived from a preposition neged. Neged is in front of, something you've got face to face. In other words, something that's right up front, face to face. Neged to neged. And so it's like one verb confronting another verb right here. In other words, the verbs are kind of at each other in a sense. And it goes a long ways to describe what this particular verb does. In other words, it's you don't just say something, it's something that has to be said face to face, something that is important, has to be right there. Now in Genesis 2, when God creates makes the Etzer Kenegdo, the helpmeet, that person's face to face. In other words, what happens face to face is a very, very important thing. So Haged and Nigad. And then this one is first person plural. We must say, we must confront. And I'm communicating, the word Naged is to speak or to affirm. And it's not just simply saying something, it's something that has to be emphasized, has to be driven home. So we must confront the king face to face, okay? Haged, Nagid, Lamelech, to the king, Et Kol, Hadivarim, all of these things, all of these matters, all these words, Ha'ela, that's a demonstrative pronoun right here. So all of these things that they had heard from Baruch. And so they asked Baruch, saying, tell us now how you wrote all these words from his mouth. Ve'et Baruch, Sha'alu lemor, Haged na lanu, Eche katavta et kol hadevarim ha'ela mepiv. And so to Baruch, this is a direct object marker here that they're asking him. This is receives the action of the questioning here. Shalu, third person plural suffix here, and the ending. And so, and they asked to Baruch, lemor, saying. Okay, this is a very standard word of saying, and when you have it, it introduces a direct quotation. So incidentally, that really helps to put things back into the present tense in dialogue, okay? Because we're actually listening in on what's happening here. Haged na, tell us, please, okay? Tell us now, okay? Haged na. Na is a particle of petition, particle of questioning, and it help us now, Hosanna, Hoshiana, Mana. And so this is a well-known word for asking for something, okay? Tell us, please, okay? Haged, now. It's the same as Hagid, the previous verb, and now we just see it, in a single stance here, but tell us now face to face too, then, okay? Tell us face to face, please, lanu, to us, eche, where or how, eche, how, katavta, how you wrote this, how'd you produce this? I mean, where'd this come from? Okay, tell us how these words got on the leather here on the scroll. At Kol HaDevarim, all of these words, all of these matters, all of these things. The Devar literally is words, but words in Hebrew are things that make things happen. So all of these things that make things happen, all of these matters. Elah, these things, demonstrative things. Met piv, from his mouth. Now, it's interesting in that they don't put, often translators will take this last one, this mepiv, from his mouth, and they'll they'll state right away that this is Jeremiah. Everybody knows this is Jeremiah. But when you're reading the passage, the Hebrew leaves the name of Jeremiah out of this particular verse here. You have to define it on the basis of what's happening in the story. In other words, mepiv, that is from the mouth of Jeremiah. But the people who are talking to Baruch right now are leaving it out. They're kind of saying, oh, him, that one over there, him. We all kind of know who we're talking about, but we're not going to mention his name, okay, because we're heading for trouble, okay? Oh, him, that one, okay. Now, every time that you're reading a Hebrew passage and you find and you run into a personal pronoun right here, this is his mouth, okay, peeve, his mouth, of him, you always have to ask yourself, who's the antecedent? Who is this pronoun referring to? Who are we talking about? Now, very obviously, in the whole story, in the whole passage, we're talking about Jeremiah. In fact, in a verse or two later on, his name does get mentioned. In other words, they do bring up his name when they tell him to go hide themselves. But at this point, whose mouth was it? So you got to start asking yourself the question, whose mouth was it? And the answer, of course, right at that spot and in that context and in the storyline, it was the mouth of Jeremiah. But you also have to ask yourself just why they kind of left out his name right here. And because it has to make you think, where did this all come from? So yes, it came from the mouth of Jeremiah, but whatever was in the mouth of Jeremiah, where did that come from? And so you got to go back a little bit further and you go, oh, the name of came from the mouth of Jehovah. In other words, Jehovah spoke to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah spoke to Baruch, and it all got written on a scroll. In other words, when you start tracking the antecedents back, you start going, well, who actually said this? Who actually said this? This opens the gateway then to moving a little bit further back from just the mouth of Jeremiah. So it's one of, I think it's one of the hardest details of Hebrew, is just figuring out who has said what, and this is an interesting case. Hebrew often works by leaving things out. In other words, in this particular passage, they left out the name of Jeremiah, just left the pronoun. So you have to start asking yourself the question, why would they do that? And so I've been asking myself that question and come back to the answer, yeah, it is Jeremiah, but somebody also talked to Jeremiah in the first place. So this antecedent here does go back just a little bit further than Jeremiah himself. So Jeremiah 36:18, and Baruch said to them, from his mouth he recited to me all these words, and I wrote upon the book with ink. Okay, and still doing it. Okay, from his mouth. In other words, this has to be mouth of Jeremiah, but his name isn't mentioned. Okay, it's kind of like, we don't want to talk about this guy. Okay, we don't want to. There's trouble. Let's not mention this guy's name. And if we don't say anything too loud, no trouble. Okay, so anyway, Vayomer lachem Baruch me'piv yekra elai et kol hadavarim ha'ela ve'ani kotev al ha'sefer bedavo. See. Okay, and then he said to them, Baruch said to them, Mipi, from his mouth, Yikra, he recited, he spoke, he said, he read, Yikra, Elai, to me, et, direct object marker here, all the words, these words, ha'ela, ha'devarim ha'ela. We're going to see this phrase quite a bit in the sequence here, but all of these words, all of these matters are coming up right now, and it all comes from his mouth. In other words, there's one source we all know about right here, Mepiv, the mouth of Jeremiah. But like I said, we're looking back for the antecedent. There might be one behind that one as yet. So, Mepiv, Kol Hadavarim Ha'ela, Ve'ani, and I. Okay, this is the short form of first person pronoun. What's called an independent pronoun, so it stands by itself here. And I. The longer form is Anochi. Okay, when it goes down to ani, this makes it a little bit more personal. The ani, kotev, and I writing. I am participle word here. I am writing. I wrote it down. Al hasefer, onto the book, Bad de vo, bad de vo. It's a quite an interesting sequence here. Bad vo. Okay. Yeah. This shava has to be a silent shava. Bad vo. Okay. So bad vo. This is actually the word here. It's the only time this word actually appears in the Bible. So you kind of have to start digging a little bit as to where that word came from. And most people just simply take a look at the context and say, wow, the only thing you're going to write on a scroll is with ink. So that's the only thing that really makes sense in the context of the story. So that's how this gets defined then, ba devo deyo. There is a material, it's a balsam type of oil, bedilio. You find it in the second chapter of Genesis, bed lach. Now the other thing, bad, is bad means something that's separated out, and when the perfumes are being prepared for use in the temple, they goes bad, bebad, bad, bebad, bad, bebad. I should have connected that verse in here, but it's one that's very easy to remember because the bet dalet kind of pops up 3 or 4 times in a row, and so portion by portion by portion by portion, okay, and that's bad is something that's separated out in portions, okay, and it's part of the root of lebado, abado. It's an interesting, what I call a very basic root that can be used in many ways, and this it's used here for ink, okay, bado. And the official said to Baruch, go, hide, you and Jeremiah, and no one must know where you are. So finally Jeremiah just gets some press here. Finally mentioned his name explicitly when they realize what they're dealing with, and they knew pretty quickly that Baruch himself wouldn't have been writing something like that, but Jeremiah certainly had the capacity to write something like that. So here we go with Jeremiah. Vayomaru sharim el Baruch lech ish shater ata veYirmiyahu ve'ish al yada efo atem. And Vayomru, they said, this is a plural form with the surik on the end here. Sharim, the officials, the czars, the chiefs, the priests, the principal guys, the top dogs, Hasharim, they said, Al Baruch to Baruch, Lech. This is an imperative form right here, and it's, when you look it up in the dictionary, look it up in your Blue Letter Bible dictionary or lexicon, that's the electronic lexicon they have, they're going to list the root that's listed under as Hey Lamed Kaf, okay? Hey Lamed Kaf. Obviously, the Hey isn't here. In other words, it's gone. And this is very, very normal for an imperative form. An imperative form often goes right straight down to the very base root. So the base root of halach is lech, okay? And so when you're learning vocabulary, learn the base root, and then obviously attached to it the normal three consonant root that would be in your dictionary. But just be very, very cognizant of the fact that this first hey is going to disappear, and you're going to have all kinds of other connections in front of it with yod or aleph or other prefix forms in front of this root. But just get to see the root, lamed kaf, and just know that a lot of other things can appear in front of it. So one of the hardest things is separating out basic roots in Hebrew, and it just takes practice, just takes attention. So just take a good look here at the lamed kaf, and then have lech, go, walk, okay, walk. Hish shater, hide, go hide, cause to hide, okay, shater. We're going to see this word a little bit later on in the context of somebody else is going to be hiding these people. I think it's kind of very, very interesting to see how that happens. Vahish shater, and hide you, okay, ata, ve'Yirmiyahu, and Jeremiah, ve'ish, and a man, no man, okay, no one, ish, al yada, not to know, prohibited to know, okay, this is prohibitive, negative, it's we prohibit them to know, okay, make sure they don't know, okay? Ve'ish al yada, efo, where atem, you are. This one is you hide yourself, you singular, ata, and you hide yourself plural, atem. In other words, here this you here is a singular, ata, and this you here is a plural. This is in English they happen to be the same. In other languages there'll be different names for singular and plural, but here in English it happens to be the same, but in Hebrew it is a different word. Ata, you, singular, atem, you, plural. And they came to the king in the courtyard, and they deposited the roll in the chamber of Elishama, the scribe, and they pronounced in the ears of the king all the troubling words. Kol hadebarim. Va yabo el hamelech ha-sera ve'et ha-Megilah hifkido be'lishkat Elishama ha-sofer ve'yegadu be'ozne hamelech et kol hadebarim. And so they came, this is a third person plural, Yabo, they came, El, towards the king, to the king, Ha-Serah, this is the courtyard, it's the square. And when you get to the base root of Chet, it's actually just a square piece of property, piece of courtyard, an atrium, or patio, or something like that, okay? Hatzera, it's, and I've put in courtyard. Courtyard actually sounds a little bit like what it should be, place. So Hatzera, Ve'et ha-Megilah, and again, the Megilah is, here it is, Megilah, the roll, the famous or infamous, we would say, the famous roll now, Hifkidu. Pagad, literally, when you look it up in the dictionary, it starts out with the very first root definition of that one as pagad, to visit, okay? It means visiting with a purpose, okay? When the Lord visits his people, he would visit Bethlehem to bring them food. He would do this, do that, okay? So pagad is to do something with a purpose, put something in place, okay? So, and the word, that's why the word deposit is such a good word here. Hifkidu, they deposited. In other words, they gave it its place of importance. They didn't just throw it in the corner. They said, okay, here it is, set it up in an important spot, and it's now part of the national treasury, okay? We have admitted it to the official material in our possession, okay? And we're writing it down, and we're going to keep track of what happens to it, and here it is, okay? So they've given it an important spot in this particular chamber, Lishkat Elishama. So at least Elishama is giving it some importance, some good press as to what it is, okay? Hif Agadu Be Lishkat Elishama Ha Sofer, the roll, the book. Okay, now we do see the two words here, Megilah. Megilah is the rounded thing, okay? And no, this is Sofer. This is the scribe. Almost mixed it up with Sefer. This is Sofer. Elishama has Sofer, okay? The scribe. Va Yigadu, and then they said, okay, they pronounced, and this is being pronounced in a way of, hey, you better listen up, okay? Yigadu is it. They pronounced very much face to face, or very much face to ear. Yigadu beozne, into the ears, Melech, of the king, et kol hadabirim, all of these words. And since these are troubling words, I did expand this out a little bit as to debarim, which are troubling words, confrontational words. This, you can derive this from what's happening here with this verb. And they confronted, they pronounced beozne hamelech et kol debarim. I find it heartening that the scribes and the leaders and the chiefs were telling Baruch and Jeremiah to go hide themselves, because it meant that in their hearts they wanted to protect them, and they knew that their information source and that the announcement or the pronouncements they were making did have very great importance for the nation, and so they wanted to protect the people, the messengers who had brought that particular message to the officials, and now it's coming to the king. Unfortunately, the king, his heart really wasn't in the right place, and we'll find out what happens from here on in and in the next video. Until then.